We are live.
We are live.
It's Improvising Radical Candor. I'm Kelly Leonard from the Second City here with Kim Scott from Radical Candor and Just Work. And we've got a friend with us, Zoe Chance,
Yay.
all the way from Yale. I'm assuming that's where you are in your office.
It is in my teeny tiny postage stamp office at Yale School of Management.
Well, I'm in my teeny tiny postage stamp office in Chicago at the Second City. Kim
And
is in
I'm
her
in my
opulent.
I'm in my bedroom actually.
Okay, yeah. You wouldn't know that. It looks like it
Yeah,
looks like an
it's
office.
I've got a bookshelf. I'm not turning my camera around. I've got an
Look,
unmade bed in front of me.
we have all had to adapt since COVID. We're doing our best, right?
We're trying.
All right, so welcome everyone. We're going to have a conversation here. I think we're going to talk for about 20, 25 minutes. We're going to invite you then to ask questions and talk to us. And this is a conversation that could go in many different ways, but we did have a quick chance to chat yesterday. And Zoe, you and I have known each other for quite a while now, but you had not met Kim. And I'm curious in terms of when, we first talked about setting this up, what your initial reaction was.
Well, way before I got to talk to Kim, I had an idea of Kim, and it was a very clear idea of Kim that she was evil. And I knew about her book, and people kept recommending her book to me, but I had this long ago ex boyfriend who embraced the concept of radical honesty, which sounded the same to me. And that just gave him license to be really mean. And he would say stupid things like when we were making out, he would be like, I wish you were more muscular. And
Oh,
just
Oh
like
my God.
jackass
God.
kinds.
I'm glad you
It's not
saved that for the broadcast. Oh my God.
it wasn't a long-term relationship, but that's what I thought your book was going to be, Kim. And finally, it was probably the fifth person who was a participant in one of my workshops recommending your book to me. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm never going to read that. That's totally not my style. And he said, no, it really is. It really is. It's not what you think. You should read this book. And of course, it's not at all what I thought. And it was, in fact, even the opposite. So then when I got the invitation to come chat with you, I was excited. And I didn't any longer believe that you were evil. But do you meet a lot of people who think that you're assume that you're going to be
Yes,
evil?
yes, I do. You are not alone. And in fact, you telling me that is an example of why feedback is such a gift because now I have the opportunity to explain how often that happens. In fact, someone I really like a lot and know was on a podcast recently and talking about sort of confusing radical candor with radical transparency, and Netflix just don't bother talking to people, just fire them. And none of those are all examples of what I would call obnoxious aggression. So radical candor is what happens when you care personally and challenge directly at the same time. But I think a lot of people, but because of the name of the book, radical candor, it sounds all challenge directly. It doesn't imply a lot of care personally. And so I would love your all's thoughts. Like, there's part of me that wishes I had called the book Compassionate Candor because it would less likely get misused. But I think Compassionate Candor wouldn't have sold as well. So, what do you all think?
I have a very strong opinion on this, and I borrow from Nir Eyal, who in one of his books said that it's not a superpower unless it can be used for evil. So I think this is also true of yes and, which
Yes.
is I have seen just countless people use yes and to try to get their own way,
Yeah.
and I think that is very similar to outcome. And because the fact is, if it were not a sticky concept in the first place, it would not be misunderstood. So I think we should long for the misunderstanding, which meant that it got through the noise. And there's so
Yeah.
much noise that we're living in right now.
Yeah. A two-word title can really be misinterpreted. You can't say everything you mean in 2 words. And it's interesting. Somebody is saying they read the book Radical Honesty, and I chose candor very intentionally because honesty, like if I say to you, I'm going to tell you the truth, it kind of implies I've got a pipeline to God, and you don't know shit from Shinola, and that's not a great way to start a conversation, right? So candor, to me at least, kind of implied, here's how I understand the situation. I also want to know how you understand the situation. Candor to me implies listening.
And Kim, I'm really glad you called the book Radical Candor because that made people actually buy it. And
It didn't make
even
them
though
read it though.
No, they totally did. And also, lots of the obnoxious, aggressive people bought the book because they wanted to
Yes.
get reinforcements, and then they got the message of compassion, right?
Yeah.
And like, even if I saw a book that was called Compassionate Candor, I'm not going to go buy that book. So I think your title was perfect, even though it was leading a few of us astray.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for no longer thinking I'm evil.
Well, the recording's not over.
Yes, that's
So
true.
Zoe, so part of what is fun for this, because Kim and I get to talk in this context and also in various other contexts because we like to do that. But I'm sort of curious, like, what is on your mind these days? We're sitting here on the 26th of April. The world is the world as it is. You have done wonderful work in influence, and you have that fantastic book. What is like sort of like in your brain today as we sit here and talk?
I love that question. And the earth and the climate has been on my mind a lot because it's been
Hmm.
Earth Day and Earth Week, and I've gone to a number of events and spoke at one here at Yale. And what I've been reflecting on is how much work and how much time it takes to convert people into believers and actors. And I've been thinking about how much work and time it took for my students to convert me into a true believer and actor on the climate issue. And this book that I've written, Influence is Your Superpower. And fortunately, influence is a power that can definitely be used for evil.
Oh
So I think
yeah.
it qualifies as a superpower. This came out last year, and by the time the book came out, I was already walking the talk, and I'm donating half of my profits from the book to the climate crisis, and that's why I've been going to these events. But when I started out teaching here at Yale, it was about 11 years ago, and I thought that my students who cared about the climate were adorable. I have a lot of students from the School for the Environment, which was then School for Forestry, and I thought they were like these cute little puppy dogs who were going to just go gamble around and try to save the world. And I knew that this was important, but I didn't see a role for someone like me. And it was a series of conversations and role modeling and relationships that were created over the course of a decade where any one of those people would have no idea that, like Maki, the fact that she challenged me to do a 30-day plant-based challenge and stop eating meat for just 30 days, that has affected and continued to affect how I eat now. And Frans starting his organization, Raise Green Climate Financing, that the little bit of money, I think the first investment that I made with his organization was $25, and then it turned into something much greater later, working on climate philanthropy. I think any of these people would feel like they failed to influence me. I think
Hmm.
that they would have felt like they failed to convert me because this was a group effort. And so this is the kind of thing I'm thinking about when I think about the next book and tackling big challenges that take far more than one conversation. And how can I help people not just see the path, but feel some motivation and help to continue to motivate each other along that path because it's really hard.
I love what you're saying, and it's resonating for me because on Sunday and Monday I was in Carrizo Plain, which is this giant sort of plain in California where there's nothing right now but wildflowers,
Hmm.
and it was so it was ecstatically beautiful. I mean, I can't, and there's nothing there. There's no water, there's no gas within 30 miles of this place, so it's not overrun with. You really have to want to see the wildflowers, and it's a 4-hour drive from here. And everyone who was there was so kind, and so it was like it was really an incredible experience. And then there's a couple of little places where there were cows, and those were marred for the wild. And I decided that's it. I've been toying with not with plant-based diet, and I'm there. Plant-based diet it is. It was
Hmm.
really one of the most persuasive trips that I've ever taken. So I love what you're saying.
Wow. And I'm still not all the way there myself. So I had a steak this weekend and I felt guilty about it, but it was really delicious. And and I don't I try not to label myself
Yeah.
in a lot of identity ways where really it's a behavior, because I think we
That's right.
do people a big disservice
Yes.
when we're labeling a behavior as an identity, like we're a vegetarian or we're a smoker. And what good does that do anyone?
Yes.
So
It's interesting as you're talking about this, I'm realizing a thing that's been coming up for me over the last, and I just had this conversation earlier today with a friend here, which is indigenous culture, whether it's poetry, authors, thinking, has been entering my world in ways it just never did before. And I sort of mirror that with spring. And my wife and I have this incredible garden that it's basically our place of joy, that we sit out there and we read and we listen to music, and it's like all summer that is our place to be. And it's this sort of beautiful oasis inside the city of Chicago, and we're right behind the L track, so literally like the steel of the L will come by, and it's on the ground by where I live, so it's not loud, but it's this sort of urban, it's not even a fight, there's some sort of like connection there. And I think understanding in indigenous culture too, their relationship with the land was so powerful, and the sort of violence that our forefathers brought over here sort of requires a kind of vigilance that seems clear. I feel I'm totally early in this because I am a meat eater. I'm someone who understands the climate crisis, but is not maybe as active as I should be. But I feel like I'm being nudged in some way. So I don't know.
I want to plug for you, especially Kelly, and anyone listening who has a good sense of humor, which is, I imagine, a lot of people who are listening right now. I think the best influence for shifting over to a plant-based diet is a Twitter account. There's probably a website also, and it's Elwood Dog Meat Company. It is so brilliant. I love, love, love this account. Molly Elwood is a copywriter. I think that she works in advertising, and she creates hilarious ads for dog meat. And you look at this and you feel so shocked, and the cognitive dissonance of knowing that the only reason that you're so disturbed is because it's a puppy. I find it very powerful.
Well, and I mean, again, this is where comedy becomes this incredible influential tool, because it's all about, it's many times, not in all, it's used in many different ways, but one of them is to call out the elephant in the room in a way where if you can get everyone laughing and then realize, like on the drive home, oh, something else was going on there. That's the best. That is what we dream in my field of doing on stage. That's I was talking to Stephen Colbert recently, and he's on our board of directors here, and is also heads up our artistic advisory board, and is an old friend, and so we're luckily in more conversation these days because he helps out here at Second City. But it is that idea of, he was asking me, like, does the generation on stage now, how passionate are they? And I'm like, I kind of think, and Zoe and Kim, I'm curious too, like for me, the young people today are as passionate as ever. It's different. They are different, but the level of care to me might be even more than previous generations I've worked with. I'm curious, in your experience working with young people, what you think.
What I see is higher than ever,
Yeah.
levels of passion and care. And this is a positive thing, and a landmine
And a pain in the
as
ass.
well. Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah,
triggering
sure.
that goes on when we have a lot of passionate people as well. Oh yeah, Elwood Dog Meat. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank
you.
you.
for
I
that.
Elwood Organic Dog Meat, right?
Yes. Yeah, she uses all of the marketing tropes
Yeah.
of family farms, and this is it looks a lot like a real account, and she never breaks character, and people will complain and they will yell at her and troll her, and she's always responding in character. She's
best.
amazing.
So good. I mostly work with old people, but I am the parent of twins who are 14, and it's my feeling that throughout all of human history. It's been the job of the younger generation to challenge the older generation.
That's right.
The younger generation will offer us some radical candor, and I think it's our job to listen to the radical candor, to really to pay attention to what they're telling us, because they're sharing some important insights with us.
It's so true, and it's so helpful for me to get this reminder, and especially as a professor, it's so easy to just profess, right?
Yes.
I'm working on a program right now that I'm very excited about designing, which is it's going to be a 6 to 12 month program, intergenerational, for people to come and spend some time at Yale and work on projects that will help them shift into a new type of work or even retirement focused on impact. So it's for later stage people in their careers, and the emphasis is in the intergenerational cross fertilization. The experience of the old meets the wisdom of the young.
Yes.
I love that. So I literally just finished reading and talking to Jean Twenge, who has a new book called Generations.
Really?
And, she's attracting some heat on Twitter, especially in some of her observations around millennials. But what was fascinating to me, and I really enjoyed the book, and there's things I was, not certain about. But what I loved about the book is that one of her theories is that we used to frame generations by events. That's the World War II kids, or that's, Depression era kids. And what she's saying in her mind, and I think this is largely true, it's technology and individualism. So what was the technology that they were born into or born with? And then this thing that has happened really, and she charts the beginning with the silent generation, but moving through, is this fierce move towards individualism, which as a positive has meant more equity, more inclusion, and those sort of things, but also an individualism that says I should be able to walk around with my AK-47.
Right.
So there's nothing clean here. There's nothing, and even to call it good and bad or right or wrong is not the thing. It is a thing in terms of where people are coming to it from, with whether I'm an analog kid, so I'm Gen X. We were sent out of the house without we didn't have cell phones, and it was like, come home when the lights come on outside. That was the thing. I played on train tracks when I really shouldn't have been. There was much danger, but I made it through. I'm here. But there is a law in Illinois, and this was in the book, and I did not know it, and I have kids. There's a law in Illinois that a kid under 14, if they're found outside of the house, like even a block away without parents, they can be fined, arrested.
The child.
The
The
child
adult.
or the parents?
The parent. The parent.
Wow. And when did that get passed?
I don't know. I mean, I don't have to worry about it now. My son's 25, but it was a thing of like, I totally sent the kids down the street to the park
Oh yeah.
by themselves when they were 9,
Yeah.
10. So I don't know. I mean, it's so some of the.
Did you
Go
get
ahead.
heat from other parents or family
No.
members?
Then no. In part two, because I lived on, and I still do, I live in this block where there were other kids my kids' age, and they would go in sort of groups, and one parent would be like, I'm going to go see if they're there. And then we'd all end up having like dinner in various backyards. It was a lovely sort of way to grow up. And so what you have now is less accidents. Kids are in many ways safer than they have ever been, but in part that's because they're not going outside.
Are they safer there? I mean, my
Well-
daughter's school was yesterday on lockdown because there was a threat.
That is
there was
true
not
also.
an active shooter, but it's scary, to get that text and you're like,
This is I challenged Gene on this in the podcast lightly because they're my guests, but I did sort of say what is lacking from this narrative to me when we talk about the mental health crisis,
Yes.
right? So,
Yeah.
I don't think I've mentioned this to either of you, but this is a thing that's been in my brain lately, which is we keep calling this a mental health crisis. What's going on with young people today? Perhaps it's an appropriate reaction to the
Yes.
world that they live in.
yes.
It could it be that no, it's sad, it's lonely, and we're afraid for really good reason, because
Yeah.
suddenly guns are the biggest form of death for young people today ever than it's ever
Yes.
been in this country.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
And the
you know,
climate.
yeah,
And
that's
climate, yes.
Zoe. Ding, ding,
It's
ding.
kind of all you need.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
You
Appropriate
know,
response.
while we're talking about kids and parents, and we had tossed around the idea yesterday of doing a listening thing, and this could be
Yeah.
really fun to practice. I want to invite the everyone who's here with us on the call. Can we do this listening
Yeah.
thing
Let's
and
do
try
it.
it? Okay, so here's how it goes. You can do this kind of listening in literally any context to get past the of a disagreement, or it can just be to build rapport, or just to get to know somebody, or you're at a party or networking event and there's like small talk and it just takes you down a level towards something deeper. And it's really simply listening for somebody's deeper values that are giving rise to the particular thoughts and opinions and feelings they might have about this topic. But the topic doesn't matter. And let's model for fun. One of you, let's do a kid parent situation.
Sure.
So, with a child that you have, or with a parent that you have, what is a topic of ongoing? And we'll just invite you to speak for a minute on that topic. But first, just let's say first come, first serve, whoever thinks of a topic that you fight
Oh,
about.
I got one. The topic that our son is having with his mom and myself is this dilemma. He's 25. He wants to be an actor. He's
Okay.
He's a good actor.
Huge
Um,
dilemma. Okay, hold on. Let me
Go ahead.
explain how we're going to listen, because then I want to hear all about it.
Got it.
And obviously, you guys have no leg to stand on to tell your son not to be an actor. So that's going to be
Exactly.
interesting
That's a
as well.
problem.
And so, Kim, you and I, and everybody listening, we're going to be listening for the deep kinds of values that that Kelly might hold, like not knowing what he's going to talk about, but at the level of justice or equity or growth or connection or these deep kinds of things. We're going to listen, and we'll listen to him talk for a minute or so. And then we'll reflect back, and we're going to say, hey, Kelly, it sounds like you care a lot about. And we'll make our guesses, and we'll see how he reacts. And then I'll explain how this can be influential after we do this part.
And
Okay.
Kelly's going to pretend like he's talking to his son.
No, I think she's going to talk to you about it, right?
No, you're going to talk to your.
I'm talking to
Well,
my.
it actually, this can be either way. It can be either
Okay.
way. So talk to us, because we're here.
Let me talk to you because I
Yeah.
can sort of I can live in both those worlds. So he got a job as a tech recruiter, which he'd been doing the last couple of years, and it pays quite well. He is making way more money than I made into my 30s doing this particular job that he hates. And I actually said to him, I'm sorry. I mean, your mom and I, because we both made our lives in the theater, we gave you the impression that you can make a life in the theater. And he goes, don't think I hadn't thought about that, was his response. But in fact, it's been this interesting back and forth because as a young, I was a dishwasher at Second City when I was 23. I mean, this is what you do. The advice I got was you want to work in a theater, and it doesn't matter what you do there. And that origin story is something that corporations give me a lot of money to talk to them about now when I come and speak to them. So it's part of the fabric of growing up is struggle, and I wanted to be a playwright, and I didn't end up becoming a playwright. I ended up doing what I do. I wrote a book. That's great, but it wasn't what I sort of set out for. So it's a very layered conversation about what do you want to do. And I've heard some authors sort of say, I maybe they shouldn't talk so much about passion, talk more about like purpose and meaning. So if we want to live in that world, what's going to make your life meaningful moment by moment, day by day? Across the board, that is going to be more important than the title that you end up with, than the party conversation about where do you work or any of that stuff is so much less important than like, what are you feeling when you wake up in the morning? Fantastic. Like what is next? this idea in my work that we talk about sort of replacing blame with curiosity. How can you be endlessly curious and because he's our son, so I have certain, I'm sure blind spots, but also I know this is someone who has the sort of soul of an artist, and real talent. Uh, so yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
it's
This is great, and this gives us a lot to go on and many angles for values that we could approach. Kim, what did you notice? What guess would you like to make?
I think what Kelly cares deeply about art and about the way that art helps people connect. Uh, and
And
Kelly,
and so all of us are listening and we're watching Kelly as he reacts, and we just
so
see
yeah,
and feel
so
how
is
it
that right?
lands.
yeah, oh, yeah.
So that's a value. I think
And
another value that I'm hearing you say is that you you want to keep your art free of your need to put food on the table.
Mm,
I think.
yeah.
And that part of keeping your mind free for art and your art free of your needs is to sort of pay attention to how you can meet those needs. And art may not be the best way to meet those needs, at least early in your career.
Mm.
Is that right or
and
wrong?
Oh,
so
sure.
so when so we're reflecting and guessing, and let's not ask like is that right or wrong,
Okay.
because it's going to be in a gray
Good.
mush
Okay.
of right, like
Mhm.
um
It's partly right, partly wrong.
the
Yeah.
the non-binary, the
Yes, the
non-binary.
non-binary. Okay. I
and
love it.
and also they are right. None of these so far are wrong, because this is what we've heard from Kelly. Although it doesn't matter if we make guesses that are wrong, and we'll see what happens. If so, as you who have been listening to us have this conversation have an idea about, it sounds like you care a lot about. If you have a guess for Kelly, put
Oh,
that
put that
in
in the
the
comments. Yeah, put that in the
comments.
in the
Yeah,
comments.
yeah, and let's see. And Kelly, something that I heard was that it sounds like you care a lot about the process of self-discovery.
Mm,
And and if you were listening and watching, Kelly's reaction to my guess was far less strong than his reaction to Kim's earlier guesses. So while you're listening and watching, you're paying as much attention to the nonverbals as to the verbal part. And I also was feeling that it sounds like you care a lot about your role as a role model, as a dad.
mm.
And this reaction was a lot
Yeah.
more
Yeah,
powerful.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And is there anything, Kelly, that you felt was there for you that Kim and I didn't quite pick up on?
No, those are the things. I gotta be honest. One of the things I'm reflecting on is I just finished. I'm reading this book called The Language Game: How Improvisation Creates Language and Changed the World by Morton Christensen and Nick Chatter. And one of the things that they propose in this book is that we've made a mistake thinking that conversations and language are like computers, like our brains are like computers. That in fact, conversation is improvised, like charades, and recognizing that our ability to misunderstand is off the charts. And so the fact is, when we're having these kinds of conversations, and I bring this up because I think it's at the root of Zoe, what you're trying to do here, which is recognize that we're all working with a lot more than maybe we recognize when we have these conversations. What is the person maybe trying to say? Uh, in the book, they say we're getting it wrong when we are speaking probably every 7 minutes. We have something wrong that we're saying, because there's no way we can be that consistent as human beings. So this ability, and I know this from my work, and I think it's what you're getting at, and Kim certainly in her work is about this as well, which is understanding that we might not get it. There are many ways that we could get it more. And one of those, of course, is asking.
So we're asking how it lands. And by the way, so Bushan has put in the comments, it sounds like you care about your relationship with your son more than anything.
Yeah, that's absolutely number one.
Okay, number one. High
Yeah.
five, Fushan.
Good listening,
Good
Bhushan.
listening.
Excellent,
I have
excellent
two,
listening.
two
And can I
yeah.
just share the brief follow up to this is that when you have a conversation with someone about their values and things they care deeply about, this is a helpful way to smooth a path toward future persuasion if that's what you want to do. So once you know what someone's deeper values or things that they care about are, and you can, if you're having a conversation with Kelly about a project you might do together, you could connect this to his art. You could connect this to him being a dad or his son, or the tension between art and money that is something that
Mm-hmm.
he thinks about. And you can see, even though I'm making up things we could talk about, I'm not even saying it, but he's like,
Art and
yes.
money.
Yes.
Yes.
And when someone feels like you have heard them, even if you got it wrong and they're explaining, no, it's really not about that. It's really more about this. After that conversation, they're also much more open to listening to you and being open to hear what it is that you care about.
I have two questions for you about listening. In particular, Zoe. One is, one of the things that was going on for me as Kelly was talking is that I was connecting that story he was telling to my own story.
Right.
And often I'll share my own story, and some people find that helpful and other people find it irritating. Like I'm trying to write myself into their I wasn't really listening to their story. I was imposing my story on top. So what do you think about that? Like what's a helpful way to tie your own story in, or should one just not do that?
If we had to choose, so this is from the perspective of wanting to be influential. This is the world that I play in,
Yeah.
right? So if we are wanting to have some influence with someone in a conversation and we had to choose, is it better for me to be talking or for them to be talking? It's better for them to be talking. And there's some cool research by Diana Tamir, for example, from Princeton. She's a neuroscientist, finding that when you scan people's brains, the pleasure activation system that lights up when we get money or eat chocolate or have sex also lights up when we talk about ourselves. And people are willing to pay money to tell strangers inconsequential facts about themselves. So it feels really, really good for people to get to talk about themselves, and they will like you better if they get to talk about themselves. But then, Kim, as I think you're maybe alluding to, at some point, if you've been asking someone a lot of questions and not sharing anything, they feel like they've been interrogated and they start to feel uncomfortable. And connecting our own stories and sharing our own challenges. I mean, you do this really beautifully in your writing. So imagining that you do this in day-to-day conversations too, where we build trust through vulnerability and sharing in a longer conversation. If it's a shorter conversation, you can just have it be about that person.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I have a second question. Then we should open it up. I bet people. Oh well, let's take Amber's question first. What about if the goal is empathy and connection and showing that?
Asking follow-up questions is the number one thing that we can do to be liked. So people like people who ask questions, and then we really like people who ask us follow-up questions, because that's how we show that we were actually listening and we cared to understand. And using people's names is surprisingly important, even though Dale Carnegie wrote about this in like 1938 or something. Neuroscience has actually found evidence for the fact that people react uniquely when they hear their own names and they feel that you're really paying attention to them. And there's this self-activation network that gets stimulated by hearing their names, and also incidentally, well, maybe not incidentally, but this is a random sidebar, when we hear the name of our romantic partner, if we're in a close relationship. So this is the creepy, weirdo, nerdy part. When people talk about losing their identity in relationships, that's literally what's going on in their brain. So anyway, asking follow-up questions and using their name are just two super simple behaviors for establishing empathy and connection.
So can I ask another follow-up question?
Yes, Kim, you can.
Thank you. Here's my other question. I've read recently there's research that shows that we often misinterpret each other's facial expressions and body language. Adam Grant has written a bunch about this. And I find this true. Very often people think I'm feeling one way and I'm actually feeling another way. And so the advice that I'm often giving people when they're having feedback conversations is, especially if they're remote, is to have them on the phone, not over video, because I think we just had a series of interpretations about Kelly's response. But maybe we were right, maybe we were wrong. What do you find is the research on our ability to, is there more noise than signal in body language and facial expressions, or should we keep trying?
I'm so curious if either of you have talked to Juliana Schroeder
Yes.
No.
or Nick Epley. Okay.
Yeah,
Nick,
well,
I
Nick-
guess, from Chicago.
Yeah, University of Chicago. He was part of the Second Science Project. He was our main researcher. Yes.
Okay. Yes. So Kelly, you can add on or flesh out some detail. But essentially, what my understanding of most of their research shows is that there is a great deal of value in connecting with someone, letting them hear our voice, and us hearing their voice. It humanizes us to each other. And then there is almost no additional benefit to the video aspect of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
That the most salient aspect is the human voice. I've been using that research when I explain to folks who hire me to speak why I don't use a PowerPoint. And I'm like, because that is now asking people to multitask, which is paying less attention to the things I'm saying. And the things I'm saying are going to be more important and interesting than the photo that goes up while I'm talking. And then Nick's more research on this is also the ways in which we presuppose how people aren't interested in our self-disclosure. So we literally created an exercise, and Kim, I think you know this one that we did, that my wife Anne created based on this research, called Universal Unique, where you pair two people up and you have them pick a topic, a very banal topic, like how you grocery shop. And we'll have a person A just describe how human beings grocery shop. Do that for about a minute. And they have that conversation. Not much comes of that. And then we ask them to take a beat, think about how they personally grocery shop, and now do that in a minute. The whole world changes. They suddenly have these juicy little specifics that, we understand each other more. We understand where we're coming from. Maybe understand what we believe. And it's out of grocery shopping. And it's a really powerful example that, don't think the things, I think we know this from comedy, right? Comedy isn't funny when it's vague. Comedy is beautifully funny when it's specific. Seinfeld was completely built on the specifics of our human day-to-day existence. That's why it worked. And the same goes for when we're having conversations. Share that you have a dog. Share that you have a cat. Share that where you come from, Chicago or wherever. And those are all these little cues that give us the ability to understand each other in really sort of provocative ways.
This is such a great encapsulation of the best thing that you can do to be more persuasive is be as concrete and human as possible. And it's the opposite of what so many of us do in business contexts. And, I've trained MBA students and feel like we train people in business schools to just spout bullshit. And it's as vague and jargony as possible. And it's just exactly the opposite of what we should be teaching them to do. No, we love having experiences that are human and that are concrete, especially when we can visualize them. And with the personal grocery shopping, even you just describing in semi-vague terms this difference between grocery shopping and me grocery, like, I want to hear about you grocery shopping. I totally do.
It's actually, it can be semi-amusing because it's, but because we all have these sort of odd little tics. I want to know, so we've got 5 minutes left. So if anyone has any other questions, put those in the comment section. And otherwise, we're just going to continue sort of on this train. And I'm staring.
Can I
Go ahead.
I want to ask you guys a question also, because you're experts on conversation. And I'm curious whether there are things about having good conversations that you still struggle with. Having thought about it, worked on it, become expert in this, what do you not, like, is there anything you suck at or you're just not brilliant at?
I struggle at a cocktail party.
Really?
Because I don't like them. Because what I want to do at a cocktail party is just follow the conversational thread with one person for a long time, and I always talk to one person for too long, and everybody wants to have these like, I find superficial conversation exhausting. And if I can move past it and have a real conversation, I find it energizing. But talking about BS, it's like being stuck in traffic for me. I hate it.
Does
Yeah.
anyone like it?
So I have a person in my life who said to me at one point, "Why can't you just have superficial chit chat with me?" And I was like, "That's what you want from me? I don't have that to give."
That's
Some people do. And
hilarious.
this is like a very close relationship in my life. It's like exhausting.
And
There's a
Ashley's saying hard to be candid at a cocktail party. It's so true.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's
about
a,
you,
and when
Kelly?
you do, people don't like it. I mean, I am candid at the cocktail party, and sometimes people experience that as obnoxious aggression.
I think the thing that Kim was sort of zeroing in on, I also struggle with, which is this can relate to something in my world or a thing that I did. And I have such shame over this, and I'll talk about it because that's what we do here. I interviewed Bruce Jackson, who's the first African-American lawyer for Microsoft, a general counsel. And he's written a terrific memoir about growing up in great poverty in Brooklyn, arrested for being Black numerous times, and the way he sort of got out. And with any of my guests, I'm trying to find the things that connect us. And because I was not finding it within a sort of improvisational context, which is normally where I find it, I was drawing on my childhood growing up in Kenilworth, Illinois, the richest, whitest suburb in the world at the time. And I was like, oh no, I didn't just do that. I didn't just equate something I grew up with. And I think we got by it. And I don't think anyone noticed. Hopefully. Don't listen to that episode. No, listen to the
Don't
episode.
put the link in there. Don't put the link in there.
Please, everyone listen to it. Send me notes. But it was definitely something that I'm like, I like check the privilege, dude. I mean, like just because your parents were the first Democrats in Kenilworth, Illinois, does not give you like street cred. So it's that sort of idea of, okay, who am I? I am coming from privilege. And great privilege. And this is part of the conversation with Nick. I gotta be honest with you too, with my son, is sort of being like, dude, like I could take the dishwashing gig because I had the landing space if everything went wrong. He does too.
Yeah.
The room is there. Yes, it's my office now, but it could also be your room. And that's the thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm looking at our
Thank
comments.
you for that
There's a-
candor.
Yes, there's a really good question here from Bouchan. Being candid in conversations makes me vulnerable many times, makes me uncomfortable, but I've also seen gain in trust as a result. How do you balance that? How do you push through the discomfort of making yourself vulnerable?
Yeah, Kim, how do you do that?
I think we were talking before we started about trapeze school, and I was saying I did it and I got 2/3 of the way up the ladder and realized I was afraid. I think that I am often not aware that what I'm saying makes me vulnerable until I've already said it. So I'm not sure that's something that others want to try to. This is more of a confession than a solution, than an answer to the question. But I published a book recently called Just Work, and it's about sort of all these terrible things that happened to me in the course of my career. And after it came out, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I told that story publicly. So sometimes just sort of just sort of holding your hand, just do it, can be useful, but maybe a certain denial or lack of self-awareness is also useful.
It seems like those stories that are helpful and build trust are stories in which You're never sharing like, and this is how amazing I am. It's like,
Yeah.
Yes.
here's a
Here's
mistake
how
that
I
I made
screwed
and
up.
what I learned from it.
Tell us
Yeah.
your
Those are
fiasco.
very relatable. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Go ahead.
One of the things I did with my a team that I worked with at Google was we once a week, and we had a team all hands, and people shared their biggest screw up of the week, and I would always start and share my biggest screw up, and I think that helped me make myself more vulnerable to the team, but it also helped the team do it. So and there was like a stuffed whoops-a-daisy, and I put $20 on top of the stuffed daisy's head. And that helped people share their screw ups, not because I hope they were so desperate for the $20, but because it sort of gave them plausible deniability. Oh, I'll play along. I don't really want to, but I want the $20.
So whoever made the biggest screw up got the $20.
They got the biggest yeah, and we decided what screw up was the best by clapping. So there was nothing high tech about this Google vulnerability thing.
I love that. We have, you can imagine, and all of us have been in different situations where we feel like imposters. And being at Yale School of Management, every single person shows up and feels like an imposter, unless they're just a ginormous narcissistic jerk. We have a few.
I'm sure.
One of the icebreakers that we do during orientation is I lead an exercise where we share essentially a fiasco, a whoopsie daisy, and students go and they go into a little breakout room and they compete with each other and they come back and they share the biggest fails. And it's such a relief to start this scary kind of new context with all these incredible. I'm intimidated by the students. I'm deeply intimidated. They're amazing. So of course they're intimidated by each other. And it's really nice to be building rapport and camaraderie by sharing fails and showing that it's okay.
This is something that in the stand-up comedy world is talked about as perspective giving. So if you look at who your favorite stand-up comics are, especially early in their career, if you look at the first 5-10 minutes of their act, it's them talking about all the ways in which they're not okay.
Yeah.
So Patton Oswalt is a schlub, Amy Schumer is a slut, John Mulaney is a drunk. I mean, it's just like the list is endless in terms of, but that is what they understand, is that instantly where are we going to get this rapport? And the rapport is me sharing all this truth with you. So now listen. And I think it's a thing
that about
yeah.
stand-up comedy, but now
Oh, every
totally,
single one.
yes.
There's not a single one who doesn't start with that, because we need to, they are teaching you how to watch them, which is different than improvisers who are perspective taking. What's on your mind in the audience? Great. We're going to translate that back to you in this other world. Stand-up comics, they're alone. There's no ensemble to help them do the storytelling. It's them, and everything is reliant on you believing and understanding them and how to watch them. So, and I think that's savvy business leaders have learned to take a page out of stand-ups for when they're sharing. We're overtime. We are 5 minutes overtime. And
Thanks.
I think we leave them wanting more, right, Kim?
Yes. Thanks, everyone, and thank you, Ashley, for your comment. I wonder if growing up Southern and female has some similarities with growing up a female in an Asian culture, because I share your sentiments, or maybe I'm doing exactly what Kelly said he did with this. But thanks, everyone. Thanks, Zoe, for joining Kelly and me. Loved this conversation.
Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you, Kim and Kelly. It's been a blast.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Take care.